for some time, but I feel as though I've not made any progress. How can one determine whether they are actually improving in their meditation practice? Well, that's in lay life. Meditation is really just a minute. What's this? Hold on. Let me just click that off. That's better. In daily life, for most lay people, and I include myself actually, because I'm always a bit busy. There isn't that much sitting practice as such. So the accent has to move really towards practice in daily life. And you have to see that as your path, and the meditation is supporting it. If you can get away for some time, a week, 2 weeks, if possible, 3 months, that would definitely up your practice. But it would be foolish to think that if you don't really bring your effort into daily life, that you're going to progress in the meditation. The one goes hand in hand with the other. Excuse me, this keeps falling off for some reason. Let's try again. Yeah. The one goes hand in hand with the other, you see. So thinking about, what's there again? 1 second. I keep getting this message about AI straight across my screen. Okay, let's try again. Okay. So we have to be clear as to what daily practice involves and how it melds in with Vipassana, insight practice, and how the insight practice affects our daily life. There's got to be a connection between the two, or else it's difficult to make obvious process. Okay, so there's this fundamental delusion that we're suffering from, this idea of me, the self, what we call the self. Remember, it's always ahead of itself. It's always looking to the future. It's always looking to what it's going to succeed in, what it's going to get. Have you been to Machu Picchu? How much money you're getting from your work? There's always that future leaning of the self. And it doesn't feel particularly safe in the present, because when you're in the present, you don't know what's going to happen. Okay? That's a dangerous place for the self to be. So it's always trying to escape it and presume it knows the future, either through fantasy when it collapses or through imagination. Not that hasn't got a place, of course it has, but it's the inability to sit in the present moment which is the problem, right? And that's the distinction between a having mode, getting mode, achieving mode, and a being mode. Just being here right now. This is a phrase you'll hear often from teachers, especially in the past, the here and now, right? Your place is here and the time is now, you see. So it's no point in planning to live in the now. You can't. That is a complete waste of time, right? You've got to live in the now. So, okay. So what the self does, remember, is it is on a negative side. What it does is it produces 3 attitudes to life, right? One is acquisitiveness, getting, achieving. One is aversion, not wanting, pushing away, anger, fear, anxiety. And of course, sorry, I should have split those two. Aversion, we can split into not wanting, pushing away, anger, and fear, running for it, right? There's all forms of aversion. And what it does is it then produces a certain way of behavior, which leans into the unethical and sometimes the immoral, right? Just to make a little distinction there. So one thing we can do is to have a look at the perfections, have a look at our virtues and reflect on them and recognize which virtue needs a little topping up. So the perfections, they call the perfections, they're named the parami. What it means is the virtues you need to get to the other shore. So that was the Buddha's metaphor for nibbana, the other shore. So the first one is giving. And he always stressed that with lay people, right? So remember, there's this virtuous circle with giving. So if you, first of all, support your giving by developing gratitude, then when you give from the freeness of your heart, either your wealth or your time, you're also renouncing something. And the path to liberation is through the renunciation of unwholesome desires. So it's a virtuous sort of circle. And it's funny that gratitude isn't included in the perfections. I mean, there's a word for it, katunya, but it's not included. But in my understanding, it's basic. It comes even before. You could slip it in with virtue. Just what it means here is the five precepts, right? The basic five precepts, and all those can be refined. So not killing a being moves towards protecting them. Yeah, not. Well, we'll come to that later. Then there's that renunciation that we've just talked about. Putting in the right effort, making sure that you've got the right effort to continue your practice in all dimensions, in all ways. Truthfulness, patience, excuse me, patience. And it's not included here, but you could include into that forgiveness, right? Patience, forgiveness, not holding on to resentments. And then there's truthfulness, truthful not only to others, but to ourselves. Yeah, we tend to fool ourselves about ourselves. So it's a case of reflecting upon ourselves, recognizing where either we are suffering from a conceit of I'm, the Trumpian conceit of I am the brilliant, I am amazing, to thinking down on yourself. I'm useless. I'm absolutely awful. That's no good either. Then there's determination. So that's the commitment to your practice. Yeah. And in your vipassana, in your insight practice, that would be sometime in the morning, sometime in the evening. And then there's loving kindness, of course. And in the discourse that that the Buddha taught on how to develop loving kindness, he's actually asking us to develop a continuous affectionate awareness, affectionate mindfulness. It's always there in the background, this sort of kindliness. Yeah. Now, for instance, you see, you can just try now. Oh, it won't be too difficult, I hope. Just try now to look upon me kindly, and I will look upon you kindly, right? And as soon as you do that, there's a little tingle, isn't there? A little tingle in the heart, right? And you tend to smile, you tend to, right? And immediately lifts you. So if you can actually practice that, just walking down the road, looking at people and wishing them well, and even when you're with a colleague or a workmate whom you can't stand, to actually develop a certain kindness towards them, then it undermines all that negative stuff, you see. And finally, there's this very lovely quality of equanimity, have a balanced mind, to always see the opposite. We tend to hold on to views, I'm right, everybody else is wrong, but it's also being open to the other person and what they think and how they feel about something, and in some way find some way to, if you can't bring it into your understanding, at least accept it as being their point of view. So there are these virtues that we can become more aware of in daily life. And then there's the Eightfold Path, of course, right? Speech, that's always a difficult one. Kindly, beneficial, truthful, and timely. That's the difficult one, timely. Like you want to say something and it's not quite the right time to say it, and you just upset somebody. So you have to be sort of aware of the other person, your connections with other people, and other people become your trainees, right? Not only not only have we got these internal trainees of the five hindrances, people around us are training us, right? There's in the monastic life, you get types of monasteries where monks and nuns live basically on their own, and then you get others where you're all together all the time, and and there's dangers in each type of monastic life, but it's the training of community is, really difficult because everybody thinks they're right. Everybody, you might think that monks are all very peaceful in the monasteries. Well, for generally speaking, they are, but they can get into awful states because they're just people. They're suffering from the same problems as everybody else. So, right speech, being aware of what we say, not always wanting to answer quickly, just giving time for whatever's being said to land, and then responding rather than reacting. And then there's right action and right livelihood. So now this is the big one, right livelihood, because most of us are at work of some sort or other. So that means that somehow you've got to make your work for you as a spiritual practice, right? Well, obviously there's the concentration, there's putting your mind to what you're doing, being aware. Again, there's working with others whom you might not particularly get on well with. But there's also this sort of fundamental attitude. Why are you doing it, you see? Now, there may be some perfectly good reasons, such as I enjoy the work, it's meaningful, etc., etc. But if it isn't like that, you've got to find another reason for it. And the reason of service, so this comes back to dana, to giving, right? That service. So even when it isn't the job you want, even if it's not what you've been looking for all your life, and you've ended up doing something which is exactly what you didn't want to do, which happened to me. I ended up teaching, which is what I originally never wanted to do. So, but if you do it out of a sense of service, no matter what it is, I'm not here talking about the teaching I've done as a monk. It was before that. So as soon as your attitude is one of service, it just lifts everything and it gives everything purpose, right? And that's your dana, that's your giving. So the reason for all this practice is because that fundamental mistake, that fundamental delusion about who I am, is always manifesting through what is unwholesome. And when we reinforce that wholesomeness, the strength of the self of me becomes stronger and stronger. And when we undermine that through virtue and through wholesome actions, we're constantly undermining the self, right? I mean, any parent will tell you that having a child is a wonderful opportunity where you've got to virtually give up everything you thought you were going to do, and the child becomes king, little emperor or empress. So that giving is there, you see. So the more we practice virtue, the more we're undermining that sense of self. That sense of self, this idea of me as being isolated, unique, discrete, separate from everything. Yeah, I do my own thing in my own way, in my own time, that sort of attitude. When we talk about Mara, that's what we're talking about. Right? We're talking about this self. Yeah. Whether Mara exists as a demonic being or not, is neither here nor there. It's the self inside of which is the demon. And that's what we're working with, right? And it expresses itself in immoral, unethical actions, moods, opinions, and all that sort of stuff. So every time we're behaving in an ethical and virtuous way, we're undermining constantly that sense of self, right? And that's the practice. So that's daily life. So now when we come to the spiritual, the actual, sorry, practice of Vipassana, it's very specific, you see, it's very specific in undermining this sense of self. So the first thing is impermanence. Now, if we're aware of every breath moving, rising and falling, disappearing, it never reappears. Every breath is distinct. So as soon as we get the idea that every moment is absolutely specific, and the reason is because each moment is a meeting of past conditions with present conditions, past causes, present conditions. So every moment has to be different. It's inbuilt in the creativity of the universe. And our job is to see that process and stop holding on to stuff. Yeah. Now, when we take that idea of impermanence into daily life, we become aware of our growing age, other people are growing old. You're aware of time passing. You're becoming more aware of death, right? And bringing death into your life is so important, right? I think I've said it before. We all, I'm sure we all wake up in the morning presuming we will live to the end of the day, but but we but it's better to think that I might die, because if you think you might die during the day, then every moment becomes that much more precious, especially from a spiritual point of view, because the Buddha is quite clear. This is the best place to be if we want liberation. So that's the first thing, to become aware of impermanence, both at this small and minute level of the breath, of sensations in the body, things like that, and outside, in ordinary daily life, when you see the passage of time, the growing old, the sudden sickness, and of course, people dying, and ourselves eventually. So that again undermines the self, because the self is scared to death about dying, right? Because the self thinks it's the body. So, our attachment, our identity with the body is profound. And you come across that whenever you think, you've had a heart attack, or you've got a bad headache, and you think, oh, it must be a stroke or something. And every time you get into those fears, that's the self. See, that's this wrong identity with this body. So impermanence undermines that identity. And then impermanence leads you into the other two qualities. If everything I'm experiencing is impermanent, then it cannot be the Nibbana Dhatu. It can't be the Nibbanic element within us, the Buddha within, right? Because the Buddha is clear that doesn't change, right? And it also points to the fact that whenever we cling on to something, it's a waste of time, because it's going to change. So what's the point of clinging, right? And that takes us into the second part, which is seeing how we create suffering for ourselves. And that's the process of seeing desire. Now, we see that in our meditation, right? You might suddenly find yourself being uncomfortable, and even without thinking, you move, right? But actually, you should have caught that thought, you see, intending to move, and then said to yourself, do I really need to move, right? Not just for comfort's sake, not just to escape pain. When you take that into daily life, you see, you're passing a coffee shop, and the coffee just grabs you by the nose and rips you into the into the restaurant. See, it's being able to withstand, pull back, no, see, and actually take control. See, remember Brexit, take control. So you've got to, every time we give into a habit which is unwholesome, we've lost agency, we've lost control. It's the habit that's controlling us. So the more you can let go of habits, the more free you feel. That's the peculiar thing. The idea of choice, of free will, we're deluded to think that because we have a choice, we have free will. But when we look into our choices, we find that they're all conditioned. So there's no free will there at all. But what we can do is liberate ourselves from the hold that these habits have upon us. And that's the second characteristic of existence. And of course, the negative side of not giving in to little petty angers, big angers, fear. Don't let anxiety stop you. Um, See, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was being very self-satisfied by saying that he was a skeptical. Uh, um, he was a skeptic. What do they call radical skepticals? Anyway, he was a skeptic, you see. And I said to him, well, I said, being a skeptic is very safe for the ego. I don't use self, it's ego, because you can't be wrong, right? You can't get caught up with anything. But then again, you can't be right because you're stuck in the middle somewhere. And I said, now that will service you very well until you come to die, and then you're gonna have to make a jump of one way or another. See? So I just said, you need to hope you die very quickly so that you have time to think. So, and the final one, of course, is this not self. Now, every time you sit in Vipassana, and remember, you make everything an object, you're looking at something, you're aware of something, and it is behaving without your agency there. A thought, an image arises, passes away, some emotion arises, passes away, a feeling, a sensation, the body arising, but as the more you make that clear to yourself, the more you're realizing, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, right? And what that delusion of thinking that we are the body and mind is slowly being undermined. Yeah? So now, all these things take time to develop, obviously, but what I would say is, don't worry about progress, right? Over time, looking back over 5 years, you will see that there's been some improvement in your attitudes, in your personality, etc. And sometimes people tell you that you're not so horrible as you used to be, and and be more concerned with the process, the moment to moment process, and that's when uh, you'll feel the progress over time. So the Buddha warned us, this is a gradual path, and for most of us, it's extremely gradual. So we have to have patience and just plod along, right? Very good. Well, I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, that I've not created confusion, and that by your practice to daily life and the sitting, you will be liberated from all suffering sooner rather than later. Very good. So we can sit for a while. Yeah. Oh, I spent a bit longer than usual. Doesn't matter. So if we sit for a while, and then we'll take refuge and precepts and do some metta. Moments, reflection. Just pick up on something that's happened during this time. How do you deal with it? Can we formulate a resolution? So we can take reps and precepts, and beginning with the three bows. Bodhang Pujami, Brahman Pujami, Sangam Pujami. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bodhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sangam saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi bodhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi sangam saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi bodham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sangam saranam gacchami. Panati pata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Adina dana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Kame sumi chachara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Sura meraya majja pamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Tisaranena saha pancha silang sadhukang katva apamadena sampadeta. Having taken the refuges and precepts, quoting the last words of the Buddha, strive diligently for your liberation. So, practicing a little metta, don't forget, we begin with somebody or a pet or whatever. That brings warmth to the heart and wishing them well, whatever's appropriate. And we can use that, remember, as a touchstone to go back to, just to bring a bit of warmth to the heart. But also good to remind ourselves that so long as we're making these internal desires, these willed desires, they're developing an attitude of goodwill. So let's bring to mind some of our benefactors. Those who are near and dear to us. Friends, people at work, whomever we wish. Bringing into our hearts a neutral person, someone we see but don't know. Learning that stream of compassion, of love rather, and goodwill, loving kindness towards ourselves. And into the heart of goodwill, anyone we're having difficulties with. Radiating outwardly, first of all, to each other, our present spiritual companion. May we radiating outwardly to our neighbours and neighbourhood. To all the people in our country, to all the peoples of Europe, all people on earth, and finally to all beings in all directions. May all beings be happy. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Very good. Thank you very much. Lovely evening. See you
Thank you
next
very
week.
much, Bhante, for this evening. So if you anybody wants to ask a question to Bhante directly in person, you're welcome to do so. Good. So if not, then so let's. Carmina, you want to ask some question?
Yes, I was just going to say that during the session, I had teardrop coming down my eyes. I just noted it and left it. Then I had itching, and then I had yawning, that's about it that I had. But I noted it and carried on.
Very good. That's it.
Right. So let's everybody pay respect to Bhante.
Oh.
So thank you very much, Bhante, for
Thank you.
another beautiful session, and I will see you next week. Thank you.
See you next week. Toodaloo.
Thank you,
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Bye, everyone.
I have just created this group. It's on